Good evening, everybody. Welcome to GameSense. Happy build season. First off, I want to apologize for the late start. Had a little bit of a technical issue connecting to our Twitch streaming server, but we're good to go. We're kicking off season 2 with our very first holiday special. I'm your host tonight, Evan Morrison, here with the rest of the GameSense crew and a very special guest who we'll introduce in just a minute. Before we get started, I want to make sure to thank our sponsor, Symbotic, for supporting our efforts and making some swanky new upgrades possible. So if you're watching the show at www.frcgamesense.com, you probably noticed we have a brand new website. If you didn't, we have a brand new website, so go check it out. You can find great info there about all of our shows, the people involved, as well as watch live and recorded episodes. Pretty soon, we'll also have a calendar and a mailing list so you can keep up with the latest GameSense happenings. Check back often for updates. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our social media. As always, we like to remind everybody that this is not an official first broadcast. Our views and the views of our guests are our own, and nothing we say here is official in any fashion. Also, we don't take ourselves too seriously, so you shouldn't either. Have fun, and if you don't like what we said, go out and prove us wrong. With that, it's time to introduce everybody. Joining me tonight on air is Ty Tremblay, Francis O'Rourke, and Naveed Shaffa.
Hello.
And shout out to my wife, Stephanie. She's running everything behind the scenes. As you may have noticed, we also have our first returning guest tonight, Frank Merrick. Frank, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Frank Merrick. I'm the director of FRC Robotics Competition.
Boom.
There you go. So we're really excited. Yeah. We're really excited to have Frank back with us. If you didn't remember, he helped us close out season 1. So huge thanks to Frank for coming on and doing this show. Tonight's show will run until about 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. But after the show, Frank and the rest of the GameSense crew will come back on air to do a short Q&A session with the live audience. You don't want to miss that. Stick around if you can. If you think of a good question during the show, you can submit that in the Twitch chat with !Q, followed by your question, by tweeting at us at FRC GameSense with hashtag FRCGS, or emailing it to gamesense@frcgamesense.com. So with all that out of the way, we're going to dive right in and start talking about the 2015 FRC game Recycle Rush. Frank, you're the head of the GDC process. Can you talk a little bit about how Recycle Rush came to be?
I sure can. The game, like all of our games typically, went through many stages of development, and actually it was a very extensive process. For the first time in 2015, we had a more, what do we call it, like a formalized, more of a structured process that had distinct stages that we would pass through, and in each stage you would essentially have a specific set of members on the GDC that will participate during that phase. There's I can't go into the whole structure, it's fairly complicated, but there's sort of an oversight committee. Those are the more senior members, and the oversight committee kind of keeps an eye on everything that's going on at sort of my level and below. And these are like members such as, the president of FRC, Don Bosey, our vice president of programs, Steve Chisholm, folks like that. And they're more like check-in folks that every so often we have these milestones we have to hit, and we check in with them and let them know what's going on. And then you have a core team, which consists of a few volunteers, myself, and a few of our staff. They kind of stay with the process throughout the every single phase. And then under that, you have kind of these phased participants. And those participants depend on what we're doing in that particular phase. For example, very early on, we're looking for broader thinking, kind of more creative folks that are familiar kind of with the show aspects. And so we might have some folks that are familiar with production, performance, that kind of thing, participating on the GDC. And then as you ease through, so we think very broadly, just like any other creative process, think very broadly at first. You eventually narrow down, and then you get to a single game, which you then implement really through it. It's almost, we think of it almost as introducing a new product. Really, we're developing a new product every year. The game is the product, and we follow like a very standard sort of new product type implementation and development process, as you would see in industry. For Recycle Rush, we actually started I have to look at my notes here for a quick second. We actually started in October of 2013. So we had a very large weekend kind of get together with lots of folks with varied backgrounds. We had a game designer who was actually like a board game designer who actually participated at this phase of the process. Folks that you would know, some Woody Flower Award winners, that kind of thing, just a large group at first. And we basically brainstormed for a weekend or so, and we came up sort of with 8 different concepts. From that point, of course, now that's when you talk about October 2013, of course, we're talking about launching the 2014 game at the same time. So things really sort of slowed down for us just because of the number of the staff that was involved. And we participated a great deal really in the entire process. And it's hard for us to both fly a plane and design a new one at the same time. And so things slowed down for us. But we got to May. So we had a few, additional conference calls and so forth and works through some process. By May of 2014, we actually were down to 3 different concepts. 2 of them I would call fairly traditional kind of FRC games. They had a little bit, maybe a twist that we're always looking for, what new we can bring to games. A little difference here and there, but sort of, you've got an object and you're moving the object around and you're trying to put the object in a certain place, and there's a lot of robot to robot interaction, 2 alliances, that kind of thing. One of the concepts was so out of the box that we couldn't even think of it properly, and we actually had to put together like a little field. We always have a field that we use kind of on the first floor in the engineering area at first, but we kind of mocked up a little field for this very unique concept. We had to do that because it was so different and unique. We just couldn't kind of wrap our heads around it. And so we played with what we call human robots. So we had robots out there, humans acting as robots out there, with something like what the game pieces and so forth are going to be. And it didn't take us too long to find out that this particular out-of-the-box concept was not going to work at all. Now, at the same time, Dean came in. So Dean is not a formal member of the game design committee, but he knows we always keep him updated in terms of what's going on. So Dean came over one day and he said, "I've got an idea.
Oh boy.
Stacks of crates with a recycling bin on top." So it was an idea that it was something that came completely out of the side, out of, you could say, left field, the Dean field, if you want to put it that way. And when we thought of a couple things. First, we immediately thought of Stack Attack. Stack Attack was actually the first year that I was a mentor on FRC, so I remember it very clearly. And I remember there wasn't a lot of stacking in Stack Attack because
yep.
kind of open. Well,
more attack than stack.
Yeah, I mean, unless people agreed to do the thing where everyone at the event said, "No, we're not going to knock over each other's stacks," and I know that was happening as well. But
yeah, there weren't too many stack agreements in 2003.
Yeah, so Dean said, and the recycling, it was a crate with kind of recycling bin, and there was a kind of a built-in theme there. And the game design committee at the time, we got together and we talked about it. And we recognized that Dean's idea was better than any of the 3 really that we had come up with. The other 3, as I said, one was completely off the wall, and 2 of them were okay. They were kind of like vanilla soft serve with sprinkles. It was kind of, you wouldn't get excited about it. You'd say, "Oh, that's kind of a neat game, I guess," but nothing anyone was really getting too excited about. They did have some twists in them which were interesting that I think may have been, we may use for later years. So here Dean comes along with this new idea, and we looked at it, as I said, it looked pretty good. And so we had a meeting, we had some additional discussions and kind of trying to flesh the game out. In August, we finally got together and really, with the folks that were on that particular phase, and really worked through the game much as like you see it now. Now, very early on, the game really did evolve. We never got to we didn't go in with the idea, "Oh, we're we're going to keep the alliances segregated, and it's going to let us do all this cool stuff. It was a gradual evolution to that point. We actually started out where you had a red side and a blue side, and in the middle was kind of like this white zone. And the white zone where all the pieces were going to be, and the robots could transfer in and out of that white zone and grab pieces and kind of push each other around a little bit. And we always have kind of the boundary problem in FRC, where if you have a line of tape on the floor, or even if you have a little bump or something like that, very easy for a robot to go over. And we were really trying to work to avoid the stack attack problem, as you guys know, where one of our principles we were working towards was we wanted teams to be able to retain their accomplishments. That's kind of like a phrase that we use, retain their accomplishments. And the way things were being set up, it just didn't work. So someone had the idea, what if we just put a barrier? And then we said, put a barrier, very different, no robot-to-robot kind of physical defense, but it opened up all these other possibilities. And we started saying, and one of the folks in the room said, geez, we don't need bumpers. What if we don't need bumpers in this game? And our eyes kind of lit up, and we thought about it, and we thought it through. And there's some nervousness anytime you try kind of an idea that we haven't tried in a while. Because I remember the days from before there were bumpers, when bumpers were optional. And usually, by the time you got to, well, as you guys know, by the time you get to the finals, many of the robots were just kind of limping around and not doing so well. It wasn't necessarily exciting. And then
the first year we needed bumpers, or the first year you had to have a bumper on your robot, was in 2006, and our team made an aluminum bumper that actually probably caused more damage than anything.
Yeah. I think it's actually an interesting point before we continue on that I think a lot of FRC robot designs have evolved along with bumpers. And if you were actually to take bumpers away from that and still leave the kind of hard contact, you'd see stuff that was even worse than back in the 2004, 2005 era, just because nobody's used to building robots that stand up to that abuse anymore because we always have bumpers. So it's, I think it works in this game, but it'd be really interesting to see in future years if will the bumpers come back.
It's and we just thought, and our number one, as you guys probably know, our number one reject for robot inspections every year, bumpers. And we try to simplify the rules as much as we can. We went through a rule simplification, I think, a few years ago on bumpers, which really helped. But still, bottom line, if you have bumpers, they have to be in certain positions, kind of on all the robots, or they don't really work. And starting to get into the frame perimeter and how much bumper you can have where, and how many inches you need on each corner and so forth. And it's just a whole lot of rules that we're able to basically do away with and say this is now optional. Of course, the other big win we realized was that if the alliances are now segregated, they can, if you are on a particular alliance, you can only get in your own alliance's way. So why have sizing restrictions at that point? Except for height, which is a kind of a safety issue, really, when it comes down to it. And a little bit of an engineering challenge as well when you talk about trying to put a recycling container up on a 6-stack. We said, how do we just get rid of the size? And we just kind of looked around and we said, geez, that might be, we thought about it some more. And I don't know if you guys saw, there was actually a question on the Q&A, and someone asked whether you could have a mechanism that was just attached to your main robot by like some type of flexible cable, something like an umbilical cord.
Sort of like a 2002 tape measure?
And the answer is yes, you can, because there's no footprint size. As long as you meet all the other requirements, you just have a single control system, you have a single battery, yada, 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 then your robot can be as big as
tethered mini-bot?
Tethered bots, if you want to do that. Now, whether that's a good strategy, I think, there's a lot of question there, but it's something you can at least consider, which is one of the things that we were really going for in this game is we wanted to give teams, and I say, okay, the teams look at a typical sizing thing, okay, we got to be this size, and we'll just go for the rectangle, or we have a design that we've been using for a couple years kind of with our drive system, we'll just do that again. In this case, at least you have to think about it. And maybe you end up with the same robot size you've always had, but it's a consideration that you actually have to apply, where in prior years your realm of flexibility was much more narrow.
Yeah, this year I found myself continually trying to design something and then throwing the idea out because no, I couldn't get that to fit back inside the frame perimeter, and then getting to go back and pick it back out of the trash and use it because I could do anything I wanted, and it was
You
awesome.
might say you were recycling it.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that's honestly though, it's one of my favorite parts about the new challenge. And there's some things that I really don't like about the new format, and some things that I didn't like initially and are growing on me. And one of the things that I really do like is the fact that it's literally breaking every single stereotype of of robot design and challenging every team to question their assumptions. And I think if you're not questioning all your assumptions, you're not getting the most out of this game. And yeah, it might work. A 6-wheel drive, drop center, octagon frame. It's still going to work, but is it worth all the weight and complexity that you're putting into it? Maybe not. Maybe you're better spent putting that in towards something else, like one of these gigantic mechanisms that you could need.
That's exactly what we're going for, and we wanted to have teams look at this game and just, especially veteran teams, rookies are going to be in shock anyway, but we wanted veteran teams to say, look at this and say, just what are we going to do? And that was kind of the vibe that I got, during kickoff. Of course, we got the field in Manchester and it went down, and there was just sort of like some dazed looks, like we really need to take a look at the manual to see what the full set of rules are, and that's.
And then you get the manual, and it's only 50 pages long.
Yeah, and that was another thing that we were very focused on. One of our key objectives, key criteria for evaluating the game this year was much simpler rules. Now, last year, the rules had to be more complex just because of the nature of the interactions, and that you were dealing with a single game piece. You needed to have some significant kind of protections in terms of how the teams were interacting with each other, and it was just a game that lent itself to a lot of rules and a lot of subjective calls. And I happen to think it was, as it was played, it was a good game once we got through kind of the adjustments that we needed to make. And yes, there was too much subjectivity in the calls. It required too many refs. It was too hard, really, to ref. I think it had a lot going for it otherwise. But with this game, once you get rid of bumpers and the robots can't cross it. Well, they can cross the other side. I think they're red carded or something if they do. But if they stay on their own alliance sides like they're expected to do, you had a lot of freedom and not many rules. There's just not a lot of things that you have to worry about in terms of making sure that the gameplay is still fair.
Yeah, and definitely the when you take away that robot to robot, contact interaction there, you can lighten up the rules, because most of those complicated judgment calls are always around what robots can and cannot do to each other. But it also, I think a lot of people were kind of turned off by that, at least initially, with the concept of no defense. We got two New Englanders on here, Francis and Ty. Francis, I don't know if you want to give your input on a game without the drivetrain defense.
Yeah, I mean, so like people say New England's got New England defense, yeah, and it's kind of more like a point of pride at this point compared to, because basically FRC is so big, everybody's got defense now, but we like to say New England defense, right? And that's just not possible. You can't pull like 3280, right? They're a team that is known for being very active in the bumper zone, we'll say. They like to go pushing and shoving, and that's going to like be different for them this year. I find it mostly just incredibly ironic that last year people were really complaining a lot about people breaking and getting blocked and possession and all this junk, and then guess what? It's all gone. That's not possible this year.
What you asked for.
And then yeah, exactly. It's 100%. Like like Andy Grady said in our very first episode, I'm a big fan of robots hitting each other, not intentionally breaking each other, but I'm a fan of people building sturdy robots that don't break when you get hit, and don't break when you put your claw outside the frame perimeter. And I don't want to say people got what they deserved, but like people got what they asked for, and maybe they didn't like it.
I'll tell you, the way that I the way that I think of it, I think of students in FRC as having a career in FRC. And maybe their career as students in FRC is about 3 years long on average. Say 3 years, maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 2 years, but say a typical student in FRC has a 3-year long career. I believe that FIRST has a responsibility to deliver a unique experience in each of those 3 years so that they get a wide variety of different ways to think about things, different challenges, different game objects. This game also happens to feature, I think, the heaviest game object we've ever had in an FRC game at 10 pounds with the recycling bin, 10 plus pounds with the recycling bin. So I see that as part of if we wanted to, we could deliver kind of like we call it a vanilla soft serve game every single year, maybe with some sprinkles. The games would look very similar. You would have that robot to robot contact every year, but I think that at some point it would start to get a little stale. And I think if there's any sort of message here, it's that we are looking for a variety of games. Now, does this mean robot to robot defense isn't coming back next year? I would never say that. It's just a situation where we, as I said, think of a student's career in FRC. We want to deliver a variety of challenges. And this, I think, is, in my perception anyway, and just from the comments I've heard, people do see this as a different kind of challenge.
I don't know if you can see it as not a different kind of challenge. There's,
Yeah.
There was a big shocker on kickoff day for a lot of us veterans looking at this going, holy cow, what is this?
Right. Yep.
But the rules, I want to go back to the rules point with the simple rules. I, for one, think that the GDC did a fantastic job with the rules this year. And perhaps that was enabled by the different game design. Perhaps it was, just also a concerted effort. But certainly commendations on that. Ty, you mentioned getting a smaller game manual. I don't know if there's really anything more to say than it all made sense. There wasn't anything contradictory. For 1 year, I didn't have any questions for the Q&A on day one that were like glaringly, I don't know,
Yeah.
So thanks. I appreciate that. That was, like I said, that was a major, simplifying the game manual was a major focus, and making sure that it was clear as well. We actually had kind of an internal goal to say, we never really reached it. We just kind of talked about it. But we'd like to have a game, some rule that just had, a game. We'd like to have a game some year that only had 30 rules. Now, we didn't quite make it this year. We were at 35 or 34 or something along those lines. Kind of our 30 rule game is like sort of not necessarily holy grail, but we think it would be pretty good. Now, we missed in some of the things. I mean, we just published an update tonight that talked about G27 and talked, of course, before the whole noodle. I don't know if we want to go into the noodle controversy situation.
Oh, yeah. We can try that.
We tried to simplify things so much that in some cases they were oversimplified, and we had to add some more complexity in just to make sure that the game kind of was enjoyable for everyone and wasn't sort of crazy making. And actually, you'll see, if you look at the motor rule, you'll see another approach that we're kind of trying as well, where you can see that we say that you can have unlimited motors. These, if they're not a sim, you can have unlimited motors. Nowadays, you can't have unlimited motors because you only have so many circuits, and there's only so much power you can draw before you pop that breaker. And we had some concerns about that because one of our regular topics on the GDC is how much room do we give the teams before they start to hurt themselves and it becomes a more frustrating experience. It becomes more frustrating and less challenging. So within that motor rule, we're trying a different approach, which is more prominent. We had it, and we actually had it in another rule, but we took it out because it was a little too much. An approach we're calling allow but educate, which means we allow teams to do things, give them the room that they need to do things with all these different motors, but we provide some information. Like Kevin O'Connor put together, our robotics engineer, put together a great paper that talks about brownouts and how you determine current draw and all that kind of thing, so that we try to provide teams the information that they need to make the right choices, even though within the rules they could make some bad choices. We're trying to educate them so they make the right choices up front.
Yeah. I mean, as this is going to sound lame, as somebody who grew up in New Hampshire, live free or die is something I approve of, and I approve of I really like the fact that it's less restrictive. You know, I don't know if I would have. I mean, I'm certainly not on the GDC, so whatever. But I think that giving more motors is not a bad thing. I was shocked when I saw it because I was like, damn, that's wow, that's a lot of options we have. You know,
Yeah.
I think you're trying to avoid using the metaphor of, you know, giving people enough rope to hang themselves, but teams can do it this year if they wanted to. They could really screw up hardcore.
Yep.
But you know, with things like Behind the Lines, brought to you by GameSense and FRC, options are available for people to educate themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think another important thing of freedom and enough room to hang yourself, just to keep saying that as much as we possibly can, is the new size rules. You know, you have as many motors as you want, and you can be as big as you want. And some teams are going to come and they're going to try to make these huge, you know,
Factories.
processing plants, and that could really come back to bite them in the end. But also, you can see these incredibly creative designs, and something that, you know, that's one of my absolute favorite things that I remember from games like 2004 and 2006 and 2005,
469 and 2010.
Right, is walking into the competition that day and looking at the other teams and seeing and saying, "Wow, you know, I never thought of it that way."
Yeah,
and
I agree with you, Ty. I think what we're trying to do, we want to have teams be able to be creative and come up with a lot of different designs, and we're hoping to get away kind of from the mini fridges that we're driving around and during Lunacy, where they're all kind of the same shape and some creative internals, but just kind of very, very similar looking, at least on the outside.
I mean, we're gonna see Transformers this year. Period. When you ask the public what's a robot and they say a transformer, like, we're gonna see Transformers this year. There are gonna be robots that get out on the field and either actively at the beginning of the match or before the match during the setup period, just all these parts everywhere somewhere from it, and just, you know, and the creative envelope is so massively big. I'm looking forward to it. I really am, especially with some of the top teams.
I think that
speaking of Transformers, how about the Decepticons? 254 releasing Megatron this year?
God, I hope they name it that.
Yes.
one of the things that we talked a lot about on the GDC is this game has a lot of innovations compared to previous games that FRC has done. But of course, with any innovation comes risk. We don't know exactly how the game is going to play out. We think we've included enough elements to keep it interesting and exciting for the teams. But especially when you talk about the no sizing restrictions, we had to put in that requirement or guideline. It's not a requirement; it's a guideline that teams need to be able to do whatever they're doing on the field within a minute. So if you're going to go out with a couple pieces to your robot, you need to put it together very quickly. And if you're coming out, you need to do the same thing. You've got a minute to kind of take it apart. And there are going to be times when teams get out there and they didn't think it through, and they've got a 3-minute assembly, and that's not going to go well for them when they're out there trying to run those matches. But that's one of the risks that we were willing to take, to say, let's try this, give as clear guidelines as we can, but let's see what the teams come up with.
So on the note about sizing.
Go ahead, Naveed.
Yeah, Naveed, go ahead.
On the note about sizing, going back to the travel regulation, what are we going to see around the field when we get to a competition after a match is done and they have time to disassemble? Are teams going to be disassembling on the field, or are you expecting them to have a disassembly area? How are they going to be enforcing that?
We're not expecting a disassembly area, we're kind of seeing it as the disassembly or the putting it back in the transport configuration, something that would take place on the field, just as if you were to, during ultimate ascent, if you have to get your robot down and kind of winch it down from the pyramid. We're expecting to see that happening on the field.
Yeah. There's a lot of real world problems that are kind of wrapped up in this concept of transport size, and beyond the published transport size, there's also shipping size.
Yes.
The last time we had robot rules that allowed the robot to be larger than the shipping crate was in 2007, and that's back when every team shipped the robot to every event. So we've got bag and tag events now, pretty much everywhere, right?
Right.
So most teams, they could put it in the bag, they could take it with them if it, like the U.S. Postal Service says, if it fits, it ships, right?
Right.
But FedEx has regulations for how large their crates they'll send, and that height is, I think, 70 inches. It's less than the maximum robot height, even in transportation mode.
That's right.
So that's something that teams have to think about ahead of time before they win their event, qualify for championships, and have to go put it in a crate and go, oh crap, I need to take a hacksaw to the top of my robot, otherwise it's not going to fit. And this is, as I say, it's a real world problem. One of the key restrictions, I work at Boeing, one of the key restrictions that we have with various pieces of hardware is it needs to be able to fit into a train tunnel, because it comes on the train from Wichita all the way to Seattle, Washington.
So that's not a myth?
So,
I thought that was always a myth.
I don't know how true it is that certain train tunnels are sized or whatever, but no, absolutely. There's certain things along the transportation path that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things to realize is that the new sizing rules and the transport configuration is a lot further along the lines of actual engineering requirements.
Yeah.
For example, NASA can build a satellite and it can be as big as they want when it gets to space, but it has to fit on the rocket ship in order to make it space. And that's, you didn't really have that last year when you weren't allowed to extend outside your frame perimeter by so much, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When really it was, now this year it's solve the problem, make it so it can get there in a normal package, and the rest is up to you.
The other thing to take into account, especially for everybody, the millions at home listening, if you want to put it into your crate, you have to put it into the bag in a way that it's going to fit. So if you win your district championship, or if you win a regional and then you put it in the bag and you take it home and put it in a crate, you're going to have to put it in the bag at your event in its ready to ship configuration, which may mean putting a hacksaw in the bag. Just saying.
Well, and another point that with this is when you're transporting the robots, even just between the pit and the field at some venues, especially in districts that have high schools, if you've got your robot on a cart and it's up higher than a couple inches, standard doorways are only 80 inches tall. So you've got a 78-inch tall robot that's up more than 2 inches. It's not an unsolvable problem, right? You take the robot off the cart and you roll it through or whatever, but you probably won't make any friends that way.
That's right.
Either don't use your cart to get it from the pit to the field. I know some teams do that; they just roll their robot, or plan for it. But there's a lot of thinking that's involved for a game that has such simple rules. I really like that.
That's right. Israel, and in fact, we're having a conversation with Israel right now. They have a ramp that they have to measure, because between the pits and the field, they don't know if the ramp has 78 inches of clearance. So I think they're going to do some measuring or something. But we're gonna figure something out. You're right, and that's another challenge for the GDC. We have to think now about all these venues. And someone was saying today that an event in Michigan or something, there's 5 like standard doorways between the pits and the field, or some crazy thing that they're going to have to, it's going to be a challenge.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that as a member of Team 190, I cannot disclose what our design is going to be this year, but If you haven't seen it, I would search Google for Blue Ball Machine. It's actually a pretty cool little video. You should check it out. Just saying. Just saying.
You would do that. You guys would do that.
Well, I'm not
Machine.
saying we're doing anything. I'm not saying we're doing anything. I'm just saying.
Oh, and I'm getting word from backstage that we may actually be able to bring that to you right now live on the air. So we'll keep talking while we'll try and pull that up.
Technology,
But,
it's here.
Yeah.
Season 2, we can put video.
Here we go. There, yes. 190th robot, everybody.
Oh,
I said I can't discuss the
Just make sure it fits in the transport fig.
Sure.
You know, another new thing.
We always
this
follow
year,
the rules as they are written. I guarantee you that. We always follow the rules as they are written.
Yeah. And
I know what you're talking about.
Subtle dig there, Francis. Subtle dig. Yeah. We're not going to go into that. But you know, something that's not new this year. There's no endgame again, and a lot of people I think saw that last year and thought either it was a fluke or something. You know, the game design committee messed something up.
Or is there a secret endgame, Frank?
There's no secret. No.
The secret end game is that there was a secret end game last year, and we're going to play that this year.
One of the totes is secretly filled with water.
One of the things that we talked about, we put an end game in if we feel that. I know it's traditionally been a part of most FRC games, and last year I think we showed that you can have an exciting game without an end game. If essentially the excitement is driven more by the clock running down than some separate tasks that needs to be done. I think we've shown that we've kind of broken that. I don't say requirement, but we tried something new last year and it kind of worked. One of the things that we're thinking of this year is we don't know how often it's going to happen, but teams, of course, can throw litter up until the last 20 seconds of the game. Now, whether that becomes an activity that happens not exactly at the end, but close to the end, and whether teams that are on the receiving end of that litter decide to just leave it or convert it into points for themselves, that's something that we're interested to see how that plays out. It's not like a traditional end game, but it's something that, depending on the strategy, we may see. My assumption is that if a team that's going to be throwing litter may want to throw it towards the end of the match, but who knows, when or if that's going to happen. But there was some thought there that in some matches we may see that happening more towards the end of the match, and maybe there's a shift in strategy. Do you ignore, like I said, do you ignore that litter that's been thrown on your side, or you take some action to convert it into points for you? I don't know what's going to happen, but I imagine in some matches we'll see at least a little bit of change in action kind of towards the end of the match.
Yeah, and I think one of the important parts to realize about the end game is that it takes the difficulty of that game to the next level. In 2007, all you had to do was hang tubes. And then to take it to the next level, you had to be able to lift bots. In 2006, all you had to do was be able to shoot balls. So then you had to climb, Mount Everest. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2004, all you had to do was really move mobile goals or turn into a giant catch-all for the balls above, and then you had to hang. So what's interesting about this game this year is there's no end game, but I think it's an incredibly difficult engineering challenge because they're very large. Right, they're very large, very heavy game objects, and you have to stack them very tall and then put them places and put very strange objects that don't exactly interact with the other objects on top of them.
I'm actually really interested to see what Naveed has to say about this. I know he talked about the end game a lot last year, or the not end game last year.
I think I've actually beat it to death enough that I'm okay with this, honestly. I think that the important part of an endgame is it needs to flow with the rest of the match, and if it doesn't flow, then it shouldn't be there. Running around shooting frisbees and then going and climbing a pyramid, if it makes things strange for the spectator, there's no reason for it to be there, and I've definitely came to terms with it, and I actually like the flow of the match. I think that's really cool. And I'm not sure where this is going to come in next, but the thing I'm most excited to talk about is the new ranking system. Do we want to start talking about that yet, or?
Let's do that right now. Let's talk about rankings,
Okay.
and then we'll move into the new
Can
playoff
I just
format.
make one comment before
Oh,
we?
sure.
You had a good point about the end game needing to fit with the rest of the game. That's exactly the approach. I know we haven't talked about this yet, and it's probably on the list somewhere. That's exactly the approach we took with the theme this year. We talked about doing themes for some time, and we'd always said that if we do a theme, it needs to fit with a game, and we did not want to have a theme that was just kind of tacked on, some stickers in the corner or something like that. And the recycling theme with the recycling bins just kind of were in the idea of pool noodles as litter. It really just was kind of a natural, it felt as if it was a natural part of the game and not something that was necessarily kind of inserted. And it's the same thing we feel about the end game.
I'll say personally, I really miss end games. I think that the games as in the last couple of years, or the last year and this year, I guess, they have their own excitement by having sort of a buzzer finish. Certainly, on 1983, we were part of a buzzer beater semifinal winning at district championship play. That may be my favorite moment from last season entirely, but. But I think one thing that the end game did have, certainly in previous years, is it brought a little bit of an upset element to it. If you had an alliance that could play a strategy that maybe limited points up until the end game, and then could pull it off, and the other alliance couldn't, then you had this massive upset, and that was really exciting. And I think I do miss to some degree. That you have that ability. I think now it's going to be a lot more cut and dry with the better alliance is going to pull off the win. Last year there was a lot of strategy involved. I'm hoping the same is kind of true this year, that a weaker alliance that pulls off a really good strategy is going to work well. But
it's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough, and I'm definitely going to miss it. On the other hand, I am excited about having the ability for the better robots to really make their impact based on more than just luck. And I think we're going to talk about that a little. So, Francis, go ahead.
Can I just speak to that? Yeah. I hate to harp on this again, but this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Is that I'm a huge fan of end game things being something that can swing the match. Not necessarily, and hopefully they're not overpowered, right? They're
mini bots.
Yeah, I mean, mini bots to a great ideal was one of the examples of something that was overpowered, or even like the ramp in 2003, for example, if you can go back that far. But this goes back to like people complaining and then getting what they want, right? Like, if you want a game where the best robots win, you need to have a game that scales linearly with the robot and doesn't hit a bump like in an end game. And if that's what you want, and you don't have and like you can't always have both. End games exist not to watch 1114 climb a pyramid and say ooh right. It exists to like change the game and add dynamic qualities to it.
Yeah.
And
there's always
dynamics. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to say, within the GDC, the term that we use for that is Hail Mary. So we say, what's the Hail Mary? What's the unlikely event that a team from behind can do to score significant points, enough points so that you can kind of swing. You can swing the match one way or the other, and many times that's an important element. I think it's now this year, because it's not win-loss tie, it brings a very different dynamic to the situation, where every team is trying to maximize their points. And I know we want to talk about the kind of the new tournament structure at some point, but that's one of the things with this game. It was very hard for us on the GDC to pull ourselves away from that win-loss tie sort of mentality, even when we knew that it was that we were going in this very different direction with using average points. Many times we just found ourselves automatically slipping into that when it wasn't appropriate. because this game is very different in that regard. It doesn't. The wins and the losses don't matter. You can have a win. I mean, might as well start talking about it. You know, I mean, you can have, as folks know now, the number of points that an alliance scores is going to mean different things to each team on that alliance. For one team, it could move them up in the rank, and for two others, it could move them down. Teams that quote unquote won, that outscored the other alliance. Every team on that alliance that outscored the other could be moving down in rank based on their score, depending on what that score is. So it's a very different way that we need to think about it, and that's the reason why we have enhanced our audience screens to help the audiences and the teams see. Well, I see the score, but that's not a win. So what does that really matter? We show you what does that really mean. We show you what it means. This is what it means, and we display the new rank immediately after the scores are locked in.
Oh, really? Like the top X, or
Team?
how much are we talking?
No, the individual teams in that match.
Do you read my blog?
Oh,
You can read my
sometimes.
Doesn't sound like it.
I for one really do like the new ranking system that's being used here. I think it provides. I mean, it's very similar to other existing ranking systems for other sports that are not win-loss.
Sure.
So that makes it an audience-friendly system in terms of it's intuitive.
Right.
With the total score, average score, it's in this it's kind of the same thing. And I like that it's performance-based, right? That it's actually based on your robot and your alliance's performance in matches, as opposed to just whether you got over a threshold or not.
Right.
So I don't know what the rest of you guys think about that, but do you like it? Do you not like it?
I do, and I think there's a lot of big consequences because of it that I didn't anticipate at the beginning. Yes, because it's based off of the qualification average. A team that is able to score a lot of points is going to rank highly. But somebody who comes to their first event and isn't quite ready to go and might bomb a few matches, I'm thinking, for example, 233, not to call you out, but if they come to their first event are still building their robot, sure, they're going to be the elimination kings as always, but it might mean that they rank a little bit lower than usual, or a team that isn't ready to go.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I definitely don't like, and I'm still grappling with this, I really don't like the new tournament structure. So for those that don't know it, it's more of a round robin style. During quarterfinals, the two teams basically play number one. I think we have a graphic for this, but number one and number two play 7 and 8, and then they swap. And so those are their two matches. And 3 and 4 play 5 and 6, and then they swap.
But it doesn't matter.
Those are their two matches. It doesn't matter. Everybody's competing against everybody else. And it's average score. Okay. Steph's got the manual pulled up right now that shows this. So it's average score over those two matches, and then the top 4 teams move on. So you could actually have number 8 pull an upset, right, quote unquote upset, and move ahead of the next 4 teams if they put together a new alliance. That part's kind of cool. The part that I don't like is it's eliminated a lot of the margin of error. You've only got 2 matches, and instead of being a best 2 out of 3, where a good alliance, if they have a rough match and one of their robots breaks down, they can still move on. In this format, if I've got an alliance that scores 260 points in the first match, and then a robot breaks and only scores 50 points in the second match, I very well could be out of the playoffs and quarterfinals because another alliance scored 155 points both matches, and they've got the better average, so they beat me. So
I developed a strategy to make sure that doesn't happen. Actually, it's don't break and don't screw up and just win. Like this is I sound like a broken record all this episode because I just like if you aren't good enough, you don't win.
Yeah.
Boom. Like just do it.
Consistency is more important than ever.
One of the things,
yes, absolutely.
And one of the things that we are looking for is we recognize that under the prior tournament structure, depending on who is playing who, you may not end up with the 2 best alliances in the finals. And I think in this case, Francis, taking into account your need for, you mentioned a need for consistency, I think we are more likely to see the two best alliances end up in the finals matches. And one of the things that does is you've probably, I hear you guys don't read the FRC blog. I'm a little disappointed with that, but if you've
Look,
seen
actually, Frank, I read it because I'm the only one that follows Twitter.
Just one
All
of us
these
doesn't
people.
If you go back and look up the wild card rules, we're going to see more expansive wild cards. Those wild cards, of course, go to the finalist alliance. I think we're going to see the teams that deserve those wild cards more likely getting them this year than in the old tournament structure, which was very exciting and still lent itself to upsets. But you're going to see, I think, the best two alliances ending up in the finals more often than not. But it's very different, no question. You get two matches, your average score. If you screw up one match, that's going to be a problem. Consistency is key. Understanding what your opposing alliance is going to be able to do or is capable of doing with those game pieces that are on the step, very important. You need to think about that. And one of the other things that I think is exciting is that every match matters. Even a match that you are not in can affect whether or not you are going to be advancing, to the next round.
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking. Certainly, I'm obviously still trying to wrap my head around it. I think my big concern with it is very frequently we see top alliances have rough quarterfinals matches as they're just trying to work things out with alliance partners. And I don't know if that's going to be better this year because of the way that the game works and the dynamic there, or not. On the other hand, it is a more similar requirement in eliminations as it is or playoffs, I should say, as it is in the qualification matches now until you get to the finals.
Right.
But your
I'm
alliance
excited
makeup.
to see.
Yeah. Sorry, Naveed. Go ahead.
No problem. I'm just excited to see what the district point model system looks like, and I think it'll also be better, even without having seen the point structure and breakup. I think it will better reflect, even more so than it did last year, as to the teams that should move on to the World Championships.
Yeah. I'm definitely curious to see what the district point system is going to look like. I hope it's normalized in some way.
It is normalized, actually.
Okay.
But you guys seriously do not read the FRC blog. Geez, I'm so disappointed. No, but actually we talked about I outlined what it was going to look like in very top level detail, and it is normalized. It really follows a very similar curve to when you're talking about points earned during qualification matches. It really one of our engineers Danny Diaz, who's our systems engineer, just joined us in the last 6 months or so, or 5 months, I can't remember when. And he came up with this wonderful formula. We call it Danny's magic formula. And what it does is it essentially converts ranking, instead of win-loss tie yielding directly points, it converts ranking to points. And the curves are very similar. It's essentially a normalized curve. Teams at the top of the ranking and get a significant number of points. Most teams are in the middle. Teams at the bottom get a few points, and it looks very much like the curve, say, from last year. Really, when you look at
So, how do you tackle the variability between points from on-field performance and off-field performance? Because now we're looking at what is a non-standard on-field performance metric for teams compared to the awards, which don't scale.
We haven't changed the awards points at all. And what we really did was essentially the top score, the top number of points that teams will be receiving as part of their qualification performance is 22, which is very similar to what really very few teams got 24 points, went for 12 wins in the district
Sure.
system. It was something like 0.6% in Michigan or something like that. The top score you typically saw was 22. That's going to be the top score in this system as well. The system is we have to write up the rules and put everything. I mean, we have it finished. We just have to put it. There's actually going to be a new section of the admin manual, section 7, which is going to talk about this and kind of advancement in general within FRC.
Cool. Well, looking forward to see that published.
Oh, me too.
So
I don't know.
we're gonna.
Hopefully, next year. We've been a little busy.
Ooh.
So since we started late, we're gonna run for like 5 or more minutes, and then we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll come back for the audience Q&A. The last thing that we wanted to really touch upon tonight is all the changes for Championships 2015. Obviously, we're going to 8 divisions, subdivisions. Still 4 divisions. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one. But how are we gonna see this play out, especially with the 2 Einsteins? I'm really excited. Frank, do you want to fill us in a little bit on that, and then we'll all share our thoughts, I think.
Yeah, sure. And so we do have, like you said, we have 8 subdivisions. We're going to keep the 4 division names. Those existing 4 names are going to now become subdivision names. We're developing a list. We've got a short list of new names for the subdivisions, for the additional 4 subdivisions. And then if you think of the dome as a rectangle, you're basically going to have 2 fields on each side of that rectangle, appropriately spaced. The 2 subdivisions that are adjacent to each other will be combined, in a division format. So you might have like Curie Newton or something like that. Curie-Newton is a division name. That's where the judged awards are going to be given out. So there'll be one award, one of our traditional awards for a team among the 150 that will be on that division. So the judges, they call them stages. It's kind of an odd term, but it's a term that the judges use. So there are going to be 8 stages at the championship, 8 sets of judges. They select their top candidate for each award within that subdivision, and then the 2 stages that get together for the division, they get together. They talk about which team among the 2 tops that they have is actually going to win the award for that division. The 2 Einstein fields, we're running the 2 Einstein fields for really a couple of reasons. First, we need to use fields that are already standing. There's no room to put any special Einstein field. We don't have any room. We got 600 teams there. So we're going to be using 2 of the existing fields. We're going to be dressing them up a little bit. We'll do some special lighting or something. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. And they're going to be converted kind of like to the Einstein fields. And then we're going to be sort of ping-ponging matches because we do have 8 winning alliances, 1 from each of the subdivisions, going to that Einstein stage. So for the first time, we're going to have 8 alliances on Einstein, at least the first time in the last several years since I've been around. We're going to have 8 alliances on Einstein. We're going to be ping-ponging matches, and we really just need that space. We need to use those 2 fields, not just from a practical standpoint, but if you can imagine the massive crowd that we're going to have on Einstein. We're going to be opening the seats up all the way up to the top, and the dome is just going to be packed. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a great time.
So you're going to be showing, since obviously you don't want the crowd moving back and forth across the dome to catch all the matches, are you going to be able to show the other Einstein field on a screen that near each other, or how's that going to work?
The way that it's going to be set up is they will both be visible from the end. So if you can, okay. I've kind of drawn with my hands here, but essentially you have 2 Einstein fields that are at the end of the dome, and there are 2 fields on each side of the dome. And so if you're in sort of that end area, you'll be able to see both fields. But we're going to be projecting the action also on the side screens for those divisions that are right nearby there for teams that are not in, for folks that are not in great seats, they'll still be able to see that.
So if I might make a small request, for the love of God, please have a static full field camera available so that those of us that are watching can see the entire field. Because because it's great to have the zoom in view when you've got the field in front of you, but it makes it really hard for those of us, especially if you're trying to scout an alliance that you might be playing against later on in the tournament. So
I guess
that's just a request for me. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but
we'll see what we can do. We talked about like a top-down view or something, or what are you talking about?
anything that just shows the whole field all in one shot
Instead of
Have you
following.
ever seen?
instead of yeah.
Have you ever
Top
seen the
down, you
cameraman?
can't see stacks.
I know that's the thing. That was the thing. We're trying to figure
Yeah.
out how to show that one shot that would kind of fit everything in.
It goes back to the old zooming in on the compressor of a robot shot that cameramen really like, but nobody else does, unfortunately. But
Yeah. I mean,
So this,
go ahead, Naveed.
no, after you.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think basically an audience view is what most teams are
Yeah.
used to. Most people are used to seeing as a full field
Mhm.
shot, something
Okay.
from the stands, looking forward, no different as if you're sitting in the stands. Um, and that's not to say that you don't have another video feed that's also that's also there, because what's another video feed? I mean, really. Um, seriously, it's actually a big deal. But I think if you're going to split Einstein, I really believe strongly that it would be a good idea to have a view that people can watch without being directed where they're looking.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
On that same
Did
note,
you
talking
wanna add-
about broadcasting, is Comcast going to be helping out at the championship again?
I'm not sure how what the deal is there. To be honest with you, it's been
Okay.
talked about how exactly we're going to handle that. We won't have any room on the dome floor itself for any kind of broadcast trucks, because it's going to be wall-to-wall teams. I mean, during the playoffs, we're doing all we can just to squeeze those alliances in that we need.
Just going to be a lot of streams.
Yeah, it will.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm really looking forward to it. We're just about out of time for our hour. So I want to, before we go, say once again thanks to Frank, and we're gonna come back in probably about 3 to 5 minutes or so. We're just gonna go to a blank screen for a little while, and then we'll take some audience questions. So you see down at the bottom, if you have a question, you can tweet us at FRC GameSense, hashtag FRCGS. Email us GameSense at frcgamesense.com, or !Q and then your question in Twitch and YouTube. That's automatically going to get the question. We'll take as many as we can. Probably try and go for about 15 minutes or so, or until Frank gets tired of answering questions. So thanks again for
Sounds good.
watching.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right.
Enjoy the music.
thank y'all.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.